Hey everyone. So we're on what I think is going to be the last video of this series. It's Harley Quinn, her Valentine's Day special, part 2. When we left her, she had just gotten to the charity event and was wearing this, gorgeous new dress that she had just bought. And apparently, while she's outside the charity event, this old man hits on her and says, how'd you like to go back to my place? And he's like, I like to fondle pretty things. And she's like, are you kidding me? And she's, she does this thing that I was like, no way. She says, you know what? Sure, run, go home and start without me. And he's like, oh my gosh, okay, here's my card, here's with the address on it. I'll turn on the hot tub. And that reminds me of, I don't know how many of you have seen Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion, but my sister and I used to watch that movie all the time. It has Lisa Kudrow and Mira Sorvino, I think is how you pronounce her last name. Anyway, they say that Mira says that to her high school crush, towards the end of the movie, and it's just funny. It's just perfect. It's just the perfect line. So that's what it made me think of. I don't know if you guys have seen that movie or not. It's a funny movie though. I mean, of course it has Lisa Kudrow and Alan Cummings is in it too. I really like him. He was Nightcrawler in the X-Men movies in the second one. I think he did a really good job. I thought that was really cool. Nightcrawler is one of my favorite characters, as I have a lot of favorite characters, but of course you guys know that already. I mean, or you should by now. Anyway, so there's an announcement over the PA that says, ladies and gentlemen, the big auction for the date with Bruce Wayne is about to begin. And Harley says, well, you guys are lucky because that just saved you from 2 pages of me going to that guy's house and killing him, and stuffing him in his own hot tub. So anyway, okay, the auction starts with Harley bidding $47. And then, it gets all the way up to $1 million. This lady bids $1 million. And Harley's like, wait, hold on, I have to make a call. So she calls Tony and says, Tony, how much money did we get? Because he told her, okay, I'll count it and, text you as soon as I know the amount. And he says it adds up to $1,100,000. So that's what Harley bids. And she chokes out this lady or kills her. I think she kills her because look, you can see blood right there. She kills her so that she can't bid anymore. Oh. And then she goes up in there and says, hiya, Mr. Wayne, do you remember me? And he's like, Dr. Harley Quinzel. Well, this is quite a surprise. And he kind of is thinking, Harley Quinn, what does she want? Bruce Wayne, what is she up to? And the lady at the auction's like, so how are you going to pay for this, dear? And she's like, cash, my manservant is bringing it up right now. And so there's Tony with all the money, and he's like, manservant, the things I do for this girl. And then all of a sudden someone says, everyone freeze, this is a robbery. And Tony's like, oh, of course it is. So it's the Carp and the Sea Robin, and Harley's like, stand back, Mr. Wayne, I'll take care of you. And, and he's like, I can take care of myself. And so she tries to, hit them with the, or she does succeed in hitting Sea Robin with the microphone, right where it hurts. But the Carp said, he shoots a net at her, and she's like, are you kidding? I'm prepared. She takes out her knife and she says, as soon as I get out of this, you're dead. And he's like, it's not just a net. And he basically fries her. So she falls asleep. And Tony jumps in front of Mr. Wayne and Bruce Wayne and says, stand back. I'll take care of this. And, I can't believe you hurt my friend. And Bruce is like, Harley has a friend? And the Carp says, no, you don't, this special sea slime should do the trick. It has toxins from a pufferfish, And you won't die, but you'll be paralyzed and hallucinate yourself into Slumberland. So they're covered in the sea slime. And then you all of a sudden see Bruce Wayne in bed with Harley. And she's like, so, I have a question for you. And he's like, oh, okay. And she starts naming all of these girls' names. There's like 16 girls' names, including like Selena, Vicky, and Talia. Naming all these names. And he's like, she's like, who are all these women? And he's like, where did you get those names? And she's like, you talk in your sleep. And I sleep. And he's like, those are just the names I was thinking about if we had a little girl. Yeah, that's it. And she's like, oh, but we just got married a week ago. You're trying to move really fast. And so notice her ring, like a diamond encrusted bat, basically. And she's like, oh, I forgot to tell you that the Commish and Catwoman robbed a cat statue. And he's like, you answered the phone? Where's Alfred? And she's like, oh, I fired him. He was going through my drawers. He's like, you mean he was putting away your laundry? And Bruce is like, he irons my underwear, right? And you fired our valet. And she's like, well, you can get him back. No problem. And he's like, so that call from Gordon you know about? And he's like, well, she's like, of course I know, And he's like, I have to get back, and she's like, well, what about breakfast? And he's like, no time, I have to get the statue back from Catwoman. And then he sees there's Batman, and instead of Robin, she's put her name there. And she's like, listen, your boy Wonder is a man now. And now you have a new partner in life and in, fighting crime. And, anyway, so they go to the Batmobile and she's like, holy cow, the bats completely covered this in their poo. What the heck? Like, and Batman's like, Alfred usually takes care of that. He's, you would know if you hadn't fired him. And she's like, how in the world does he do that? And he's like, with a shotgun? And she's like, oh, it's going to be like that. Huh? So she gets Alfred out of the trunk and she's like, how do I clean this? And he's like, well, I usually use the shim and how. There's a whole box of them behind the giant-sized Joker playing card. And Harley's like, her face is like, the what? And Batman's like, oh, crap. And so she, goes crazy and shoots it out. And she's like, how can you have that here after everything that he did to me? And, he's like, well, I just, I have a collection of unique memorabilia from my past down here. And she said, well, I don't mind the dinosaur or the giant penny. And then she said, even though I did toss that into the wishing well, but you have to get rid of all this stuff. Like, from now on, we're going to collect memorabilia together. And he's like, fine. And then he tells Alfred, Alfred, did you hear that? And Alfred says, get rid of the ridiculous paraphernalia you had no right stealing in the first place just to feed your ego. Is that correct, sir? Which I thought that was really funny that he said that because, yeah, it's kind of true. And he's like, yes, Alfred. And then he whispers, but hide the Detective Comics collection and the Polaroids in the sub-bat basement. And, Batman's like, well, come on, darling, we have a crime to catch. And he's like, I know where Catwoman hides out. And she's like, oh, really? Like, you'll have to explain that one to me. And while we're talking about explaining things, explain this, your little bat book, and how, you have all these women in here, and they have, you have scores for the women, like bat logos, like however many bat logos they have is their score. Like, what is this? And he's like, oh, wait, hold on. Before we get into that, here, smell this. He sprays her with this. And she's like, wow, there's so many fireworks all of a sudden. And Batman's like, yeah, it's Superman's birthday. He's like, Batmobile, autopilot. So, he puts the Batmobile on autopilot so he can scribble something. And you know what he writes? He's like, Harley, did you check your name? She's like, oh, no, let me check. And it's like, oh, you gave me 12. Oh, you're so sweet. And he's like, oh, and did you read the note? And she's like, no. And it says, oh, it says, someday I'm going to marry that beautiful woman. Oh, you're so sweet, Mr. Wayne. And it's like, Mr. Wayne. And then he's like, what? Oh, thank goodness it was only a dream. And so the carp is talking to him and saying, we're going to ransom you for $5 million. And Bruce Wayne's like, I'm worth way more than that. And, the carp's like, how can you be so cavalier about this? He's like, well, this isn't the first time this has happened to me. This isn't the first time I've been ransomed. So he's like, well, your girlfriend is going to bring us the ransom. He's like, girlfriend? I don't have a girlfriend. And the C. Robin's like, I told you that girl wasn't his girlfriend. It's just a stalker. And the carp's like, well, no matter. She answered. She was the first one to answer. So and she said she would bring it. So then we see Harley with Ivy and Tony. Ivy has tracked down where the kidnappers are. And so, basically the aquarium. And so they're like, okay, well, let's go. And Harley's like, no, I need to do this by myself. And they're like, you don't want us to go with you? And she's like, no, I, want to rescue him by myself. And they're like, okay, well, we're just going to order food then. Have a food party. Because Aggie's like, I have wine. And Harley's like, you guys are just going to eat without me? Now her feelings are hurt. And Ivy's like, well, you said you didn't want us to go. She's like, well, but I want you to want to go. But I don't want you to go. So Ivy's like rolling her eyes, and she says, okay, fine, Harley, you shouldn't be doing this alone, trying to, pretend like she really cares. If something ever happened to you, the thought of it would just destroy me, etc. And as she's rolling her eyes, she's like, okay, fine. And Ivy's like, seriously, be careful, text me if you need me. And I have some gadgets here that will help you on your rescue and your date. And she's like, are you jealous that I'm going on a date? And Ivy's like, oh, sweetie, jealousy is not my thing. So Harley goes to the aquarium. She sees the whale. She talks to him, and the whale talks back. And they're like best buds, because you can see her like hugging the whale. That's cute. So, and Bruce basically says, so what do you need this money for? And they're like, well, we're going to use it to buy a place in Florida and to basically preserve the fish species, to use it as a preserve. And he's like, well, why didn't you just get a grant? And the carp said, well, I tried, but the members of the oil companies kept blocking me from getting my grant because, of course, they don't want that to happen because, that's less ocean for them to, dump stuff in. And Bruce said, well, the Wayne Foundation helps out with this kind of stuff all the time. So why don't I just, set you up with that? We can get you the money, that you need, and we'll make this happen. And they're like, you would do that? Really? After everything we've done, after we kidnapped you? And he's like, well, of course, yeah. And they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we kidnapped such a decent and, generous man. And he's like, well, untie me and let's make this happen. And, so they're in the middle of untying him. And then all of a sudden there's tear gas that comes in. And here comes Harley. And so she knocks both the carp and the sea robin out. Oh, and Bruce has always also said that he could probably get their sentences reduced for robbery and kidnapping. And she's like, okay, she saves him. She's like, here you go, rinse your eyes, make sure since your skin is exposed, you know. He's like, oh. And so Harley calls the police and says, I have the kidnappers of, you know, Bruce Wayne here. You need to come pick them up. And yeah, they need an ambulance. And Bruce is like, where did you get that gas? Like, what is that? And Harley's like, oh, it's just a mix of pepper spray and some natural compound chemicals that are supposed to put you to sleep. I don't know. I got it from Ivy. She said it was harmless. And, you know, basically Bruce himself is like, Ivy, of course. Bruce is like, Harley already took care of it. They were in the middle of, you know, setting me free. And she's like, oops, well, you know. And he's like, but I have to say, you still did good. I still appreciate you coming to my rescue. And she's like, well, I didn't want to see that pretty looking face all messed up. You know, after all, we have a date tonight. And he's like, oh, you know, and he kind of passed out. So they're, you know, they're at their date and they're talking about normal things. Like Harley's talking about her patients and how she, you know, in therapy and she tries to help them. And she's also the manager of the building that she's actually living in. And he said, well, you know, he says, then it's been a long day, Harley. Is it okay if we take a rain check on the ride around the park in the carriage? You know, I'm good for it. And she's like, well, I understand, as well as I can ask one thing. And he's like, how do you feel about a goodnight kiss? And he's like, well, I guess I'm pretty flat. And then she just, you know, kisses him. And he's like, are you sure you don't want to ride? Sorry, back to your place? And she's like, no, I think I'll just walk. I think the fresh air will do me some good. And so she's telling Tony all about it. And he's like, well, that sounds like fun. But, you know, I'm happy for you, but I'm going to crash. I'll see you tomorrow. And she's like, sure thing. Thanks again for all your help. And then she's singing the song Bruce and Harley sitting in a tree, Kissing. And then she hears Harley Quinn, and she's like, holy cow, Jesus, you scared me. And she's like, what are you even doing here? And Batman's like, well, just because you left Gotham City, you know, doesn't mean that I'm not going to keep checking up on you. And she's like, well, you are on private property, and so I have the legal right to, you know, throw you out. And he's like, you know, she's like, are you threatening me? He's like, no, I just came to, you know, tell you thanks for helping a good friend of mine, you know, Bruce Wayne. And he's like, well, and just to say that, you know, he's glad that Runoff, the guy that she took the $1 million from, is finally getting a little bit of justice. And he says, unlike Wayne, though, I'm not convinced that you've changed your tune. And she's like, my tune? You know, you shouldn't concern yourself with me. Like, I'm a grown person. Like, you don't need to be looking after me, watching out for me, or anything like that. I mean, you know, is this you're some kind of warning? I mean, it's just funny that, and she said, it's funny that you think of Gotham as your town. Like, you're so egotistical. And he's like, I don't consider this a warning, Harley. It's just friendly advice. Basically, you know, hey, just keep staying on the straight and narrow. And she's like, oh, we're friends now, huh? And she's like, so fine. If we're friends, I got to know something. And he's like, know what? And so she kisses him. And she's like, yep, just like I thought. Nothing. Time to go, Bats. And by the way, you should do yourself a favor and ask your friend, Bruce Wayne, for some kissing lessons, because that guy could melt a diamond. See you later, Batman. Okay, so that's the end of that. I just thought that was a fun story. I mean, of course, with Harley, most of her stories are just fun. And I thought this was especially fun because they threw in the 2 dream sequences. It's always fun to see that because it's like an alternate reality of what could happen, even though they do that all the time in the comic books. But it was still fun to see. Like, I really enjoyed that aspect of it. So this concludes our Valentine's Day series. There's no more Valentine's Day videos. Promise you. That was it. So honestly, I'm not sure what I'm going to do next, but yeah. So I hope you will subscribe. Stay tuned to see what I'm up to next. So until next time, bye.